Is Donald Trump a Russian agent or a Russian asset? Those are not the same thing. Having lived and worked in both the USSR and Russia, and after personally meeting KGB FSB officers, I explain how Soviet and Russian intelligence recruit and used assets, why an asset is different from an agent, and why that distinction matters. Whether you agree or disagree, I encourage you to review the evidence and make up your own mind. I got a question on Quora. What do Russians think of the claims that Donald Trump is a Russian or Putin's asset? I have investigated Trump's connections with Russia and Putin and published several videos on the subject, based on hundreds of sources and my own experience of meeting several KGB agents, including General Oleg Kalugin. This is actually a real poster. It was in Montenegro. It was installed in Montenegro when Trump and Putin was running as a mates during Trump's election campaign before his first presidency. Hello there, I'm Elena, welcome to my channel. I was born, lived and worked in the USSR and witnessed its collapse. After that, I lived and worked in Russia for many years before moving to Canada. During that time, I personally met several KGB FSB officials. Unlike many people, I have first-hand knowledge of this organization, its methods, and its tactics. Not many people in the West have had this experience. I have observed Donald Trump's public statements and actions for almost 40 years, especially during the last 21 years. I have also collected a great deal of publicly available information about him that some Americans either don't know or prefer to forget. This is why my opinion may be valuable. But before answering the question, however, we first need to establish what is an asset and why it is different from an agent. There were times when I didn't know that myself, but I educated myself, and now I'm trying to help you to get educated on the matter. So, what's the difference? A KGB or FSB agent is a trained formal operative, working directly for the intelligence service, whereas a KGB FSB asset is any person who provides useful information, influence or assistance, often without realizing that they are being manipulated or used. All agents are assets, but not all assets are agents. A KGB FSB asset might be a paid informant, a willing collaborator, a corrupt government official, or an unwitting asset, often called a useful idiot, who is manipulated through flattery, ego, money, or a business ties to advance Soviet or Russian interests, without realizing that they are part of an operation. The most valuable assets are never asked to sign a document stating that they are now working for the KGB or FSB. In this my video, I talked more in detail about my personal experience. And my experience showed that the KGB watched every single foreigner who came to the USSR. Not many foreigners were allowed to visit the Soviet Union at the time, or ever during the Soviet time, except during Gorbachev's perestroika. But when the Gorbachev came to power, and during perestroika and especially afterward, many more foreigners came to the USSR and later to Russia. The KGB asked university students to keep an eye on our foreign guests. Young people were told that the USSR welcomed foreigners. Most of them were good people, but there were also evil spies among them. Therefore, all foreigners had to be watched for the well-being of Mother Russia. Students were also told that it was an honor to meet foreigners, and that they had been chosen because of their good grades and because they were good young communists. They were told that they would represent their country well, keep foreigners safe from undesirable elements, and help them enjoy their visit. These young people were not KGB agents and did not work for the KGB. They were simply students. Those who agreed were divided into couples, young one man and young one woman. They pretended that they had simply gone for a walk, accidentally met some foreigners, and offered them a free tour of the city in exchange for practicing a foreign language with a native speaker. I personally witnessed several conversations between a KGB officer and the students at my university. Later, I saw these students in action in my own city. This is not something I read in a book. I witnessed it myself. Foreigners were also required to stay in tourist hotels, where ordinary Soviet citizens were generally not even allowed to enter. That made surveillance much easier. Since Donald Trump visited the USSR, later Russia, and conducted businesses there, I can say with certainty that he was watched just like every other foreign visitor. The Russians also bought Trump's low-quality apartments and helped bail him out of financial ruin after his father's money was no longer enough to support his businesses. As for Trump, I agree for the most part with the author of the article "Opinion: Is Trump a Russian Agent or an Asset?" by Askold S. Lazinski. The authors point to several factors that, in his view, made Trump a person of long-term interest to Soviet and later Russian intelligence. These include his visits to the USSR beginning in 1987, his business ambitions in Russia, the fact that Soviet bloc security services monitored his contacts through his first wife, Ivana Trump, whose father was an informant for Czechoslovakia secret police, and later attention arising from the background of his third wife, Melania Trump, whose family had connections to Yugoslav state security. The article argues that these circumstances gave Moscow opportunities to observe and potentially cultivate Trump over many years. However, it also acknowledges that none of this alone proves that he was an intelligence agent, but rather suggests he may have been an asset. I can add that Russia interfered in both 2016 and 2024 US presidential elections to help Trump win. This was confirmed even by the admission of Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of Russia's troll factories. I agree with the author of the article, or rather he happened to agree with me, since I published my video earlier. At this point, there is no conclusive proof that Trump is a Russian agent, but there are plenty of evidence that he is a Russian asset. Here is my video. More than 65 sources were used to create it. They are listed in the video description and in the pinned comment. I also agree with former CIA officer Sean Wiswesser.
Russian intelligence officer told me early in my career, he said to me, I was asking about global war on terror, and can we all work together now? What are you seeing within your system? Again, this is a Russian helping us, betraying his country as a penetration of the Russian government. He said, make no mistake, you were the main enemy during the Cold War, you are the main enemy now, you always will be the main enemy of the Russian Federation and our intelligence services. You come number one. For us, the United States comes first. NATO comes second, the UK, France, Germany, all of you right after that. So we're in their crosshairs. We would be fools to think they're not actively penetrating your government here in the UK right now, our government in the United States, and other NATO countries. They spend too much time and effort on it. They get all the resources they need to do it.
KGB and FSB officials confirmed this many times during my life in the USSR and in Russia. Today, Russian officials repeat the same message on an almost daily basis. This is a very important article I provided in my previous video. Bottom line, in my opinion, as a Russian Canadian, it is irrelevant whether Trump is Putin's agent or asset. It is also irrelevant why Trump helps Putin against the wishes and interests of the American people. Whether he admires Putin and wants to become a dictator like him, whether he is corrupt, whether he is a useful idiot, or whether the FSB possesses compromat or compromising material on him, does not change the outcome. What matters is the result. Donald Trump didn't fulfill just one or two long-standing Soviet and later Russian strategic goals. He advanced many of them simultaneously. He weakened the rule of law and trust in democratic institutions and independent media, not only in the United States, but throughout the democratic world. Trump deepened political polarization in the United States and other democratic countries. He seriously damaged relationship with America's allies, attacked long-standing partners, undermined confidence in NATO, and weakened the alliance. He repeated Kremlin narratives, often using arguments and talking points promoted by Russian propaganda. He literally repeated them word for word. He contributed to the prolongation of the war in Ukraine and the increase in its human cost. As Trump colludes with his Russian master, cutting Ukraine's air defenses in preparation for the deployment of Witkoff and Kushner for the Grand Deal, Putin can now freely massacre Ukrainian civilian population with ballistic missiles. This is Russians posting videos on multiple launches of ballistics on Kiev last night. This is recent attack on Kiev on August 1st, 2026. Through Trump's controversial military actions and foreign policy decisions, he damaged Americans' reputation as a defender of international law. At the same time, his policies weakened the United States, its healthcare system, its economy, its military readiness, its education system, and its global leadership. Whether intentional or not, many of his actions aligned exactly with objectives that Soviet and later Russian leaders had pursued for decades, but failed to achieve. Trump accomplishes much of this in less than a year. It does not necessarily mean that Trump did all of this for Putin. He did it for himself. The goal of every dictator is to stay in power forever and avoid going to prison for the crimes they have committed. There is no honor among authoritarian leaders. They lie to one another and betray one another whenever it suits them. So if Putin expects loyalty from Trump, he may ultimately be disappointed. Trump has disappointed Putin on several occasions. However, he still does not dare to speak openly against the Russian master, repeatedly demonstrating his submissive attitude towards both Putin and Xi. He continues to repeat Kremlin propaganda word for word, trust the Russian dictator and war criminal Vladimir Putin above United States military leaders, intelligence agencies, and government institutions, and, intentionally or not, continues to help Putin. This is Putin's enemy number one, William Browder.
He is contorting himself every day to try to stay on Putin's good side.
So, what do Russians think about the claims that Trump is a Russian or Putin's asset? Many Russians have no clue about this issue. And while following state propaganda bounce between Trump is ours and Trump is a traitor, some Russians who understand how Soviet and Russian intelligence works are not surprised by these claims. They understand that an intelligence asset does not have to be a formal agent. What matters is not the label, but whether a person's actions serve the interests of a foreign power. Expecting Trump to choose American people over his dictator buddies is unrealistic. No American president or any other world leader has ever advanced so many long-standing Soviet and Russian strategic goals. In my opinion, Trump is the asset the USSR and Russia could only have dreamed of. Please review the sources in the description of this video and in the pinned comment. Please write your fact-based opinion in the comments. I welcome a discussion based on facts and evidence. If you would like to see video evidence and learn more about my meetings with KGB and FSB officials, as well as how intelligence agencies recruit assets using MICE framework, here is my video. In this my video, I presented evidence of how Trump has worked in ways that benefited Putin and harmed American interests. This political magazine article, All of Trump's Russia Ties in 7 Charts, presents a visual overview of Donald Trump's personal business and political connections to Russian individuals and entities. It maps relationship and involving Trump's members of his family, campaign officials, business associates, and Russian officials or oligarchs, showing why many of these contacts attracted scrutiny from US investigators and the media. The article doesn't claim that those connections prove wrongdoing, but illustrates the extensive network of contacts that existed and explain why they became the subject of congressional and FBI investigations. Learn the truth, stay informed, and help Ukraine. Thank you for watching. See you later.